Welcome to Perimenopausal Athletes and Beyond, a masterclass series bringing together experts from across so many fields and digging into so many different things. And today we have the beautiful Reena Parekh. Did I say your last name correctly?
You did.
Amazing. Welcome, Reena.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited.
Yeah, Reena comes to us with a real specialization in the pelvic floor, health and strengthening and personal training. And, coming through the last masterclass series, we all really, we're talking a lot more about the pelvic floor health. And when I came into learn about you and the work you're doing, and then I read your story, and it's so powerful how you share your story and how you got into being a professional and passionate, and the research you've done and the work you're doing with your clients and taking it forward to the present day. And I'm wondering if you can really, just share your story, because here I'll just say one more thing and I'll say why. And what I want people to listen to from this is like, we as women and female athletes in perimenopause and beyond, we might not, we're in 35 plus. And so we're in our 40s or we're in our 50s or 60s, and it's not too late. At the end of the day, this is what's so exciting. And thank goodness we have people like Reena to come and help us and figure this out. So with that, share with us your story of how you've come to this and why you've become such a proponent of, mental health and change and creating a space for women to bring this forward.
Where should I start?
I was born, and then
it was a Wednesday.
Well, just, how you came to, it was almost like one day you realized that these symptoms, like running to the bathroom, wearing panty liners to the gym, sitting on the sidelines, not wanting to run, jump, when you wrote that, you still weren't able to quite run. I don't know if that's still the case now, but that you kept on being told this isn't normal. And I think sharing that part of you and that challenge to the norm, like this is not normal, and it doesn't matter if you're in your 60s, you can still do something about it, and how you came to realize that for yourself.
Yeah, so I have two kids, and after my son, I came back to fitness fairly easily, if you will, in comparison to what I've seen a lot of other athletes experience. And so I didn't have a full understanding, and this was more than 6 years ago now, we're talking a full understanding of the impact and importance of pelvic floor health when you're returning to exercise postpartum. I knew a little bit. I had DRA, which got healed fairly quickly, but again, my body, it came back and it did what it needed to do. And so I didn't have any stress or worries. When I was pregnant with my daughter, I entered that pregnancy probably stronger than I'd ever been in my life. I was lifting 4 days a week. I was finally using barbells in a way that really showed strength. It was a progressive program. And I was like, wow, this is really fun. It was very different at the time because I loved my HIIT workouts and teaching group fitness before that. So this was a whole new world for me, and I was really loving it. And when I found out I was pregnant, I was able to continue lifting. And of course, we have to modify, and we're not going for PRs anymore and all of that. So that was fine. And I was able to do that right through my pregnancy. And I was really grateful for that. The pregnancy itself was a little bit more challenging than my first. Baby sat really low. I experienced girdle pain, a lot of discomfort. And so by then I had already been familiar with the idea of a pelvic floor physio. And I think this is like that point is where a lot of pregnant people will just, well, this is just part of pregnancy. I should just sit down. And maybe I should just stop doing so much. Or I should cut out my physical activity because I still have to care for my toddler. But because I was already aware, I knew that there was help available.
Yeah.
And so that is a big first step, right, for a lot of people. So upon seeing the pelvic floor physio, they helped with my girdle pain. They helped me with managing constipation, all kinds of things. And we found out that I had very, very tight pelvic floor muscles, so hypertonic muscles, which can often lead to symptoms like leaking or increased chances of prolapse and pain and discomfort. And so the release work started there. At some point,
can I just interrupt? Do you think that super hypertonic floor muscles, was that, what I'm wondering is, as athletes and, holding and doing the strength training, we sometimes have these adaptations to doing the training that just, really have that tightness to hold rather than breathing through it and learning how to do that. This could happen. So we're not just talking to people that may have had, or, children. It could be for anybody that you might be actually having pelvic floor challenges just because of the way we have been doing things.
Absolutely. And pelvic floor hypertonicity, that is a result of many variables in your life.
Yeah.
Trauma, tension, stress, your cycle, your digestive health, so many different things. And, pregnancy is one of those things that can lead to that as well. And it was about my third trimester where I started feeling a pressure.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is different. And this pregnancy, I'm being completely candid here, I was constipated, and of course I had to take iron supplements, so that didn't help. And so I really struggled. And so this new pressure feeling, and again, this is listening to our bodies and saying something isn't right here. I should get this checked out versus this is just part of pregnancy. It'll go away. So sure enough, I talked to my pelvic floor physio saying something doesn't feel right. She asked if she could take a look, and sure enough, I had a low-grade rectocele, and that is the prolapse. And so that was one of those things that kind of took me back, and in a way devastating, because these things are not necessarily reversible. We have to learn to manage them. And throughout pregnancy, there's not a whole ton you can do, right? Except manage that until after the baby is delivered, because of course delivery has a whole other, depending on how things go, can have a whole impact on your pelvic floor health. So that was when I really realized, I'm like, I got to look into this more. And so I took a deep dive, started asking every single question I could think of to my pelvic floor physio, and just got as much information as I could. Started speaking to, I have a huge community of parents. So started normalizing these conversations too, right? Because too many of us suffer alone in this. And I started sharing my story on Instagram as well. After every physio appointment, I would do a live story.
Love it.
And talk about my experience, because most people don't actually know what happens behind those closed doors. And so I wanted to share that part of it as well. And, a lot of people responded to that saying, oh, I didn't know that. Thanks for sharing. I have this kind of symptom. Do you think it could be? And, my answer is always get it checked out.
Yeah.
You know your body best.
Yeah.
Get it checked out.
Yeah.
Don't sit there and question it.
Right.
And, so that was step one. And again, my delivery was challenging. She was sunny side up, so we had to do a flip, and it was a vaginal birth, and there was no medication at the birth center. So it was a whole thing, a marathon, if you will.
Yeah.
And immediately postpartum, I felt that pressure again, but I felt it in the front this time. And I sobbed for days because I knew what it was. And sure enough, it's a cystocele, which is the prolapse of a bladder. And of course, in those early days, everything feels like a lot, right? Your body's going through so much at that time. And so I emailed my physio. I said, what do I do?
Yeah.
And because I was panicking, am I going to be able to ever lift again? Am I going to be even able to exercise? What does this mean for me? And so, she said, calm down. It's okay. You just had a baby. So let's rest and heal. And I'll see you in about 8 weeks when everything has healed. I said, okay, great. So, and sure enough, those symptoms kind of subsided. Yeah. And throughout this whole time between my finding out my rectocele and the birth of my baby, I became a pre-postnatal specialist. I started learning more about prolapse. And everything pelvic health related, because this is the stuff that I realized a lot of my clients were experiencing, and maybe had talked about a bit, but not enough, in my opinion. And I wish I had been able to give them more space to talk about it. And so I, at that point, I was more committed to creating a space where we can normalize these conversations. This is real life. And, the impact on mental health after. So, I had the pelvic floor physio, I was doing all of the things, and it was 2 steps forward, 1 step back when it came back to returning to exercise. And this is the reality for so many athletes, but they won't necessarily tell us unless we ask for it, or unless we give them the space to feel comfortable enough to discuss these things. And so, fast forward 2.5 years, I'm deadlifting my body weight, I can sprint, I can jump. And it's not that I'm symptom free with my prolapse. I know how to manage my symptoms. And I also understand that my symptoms don't necessarily mean the grade. And that was a big learning as well, because it can feel like a lot, but it doesn't necessarily mean that something's going to fall out of your body, right?
Oh, that's interesting. Can you just explain that a little bit? Like when you say grade, like I do know what you're talking about. Can you help everybody understand what you mean by that?
So prolapses are usually graded, and anything, I believe stage 3 is when it's starting to show through the body, and stage 4 is the organ is outside of the body.
Right.
And so depending on how much your organ has descended, is dependent on the type of rehab you will require, possibly surgery for anything outside of the body as well. And that can also be indicative of how long it's going to be a long process to be able to come back from that, and it is a mental game, throughout me learning how to listen to my body, understanding what this meant for me. And with every time I had a win, I also had a fail, or what felt like a failure, but it was more of a learning, that really impacted my mental health.
Yeah.
And I felt like my body was broken. I felt really unattractive. I worried what this meant for me down the road as a personal trainer and my own training. Like, it was a spiral. It was just a domino effect. And so luckily for me, I've been able to access mental health resources. I've been able to access pelvic floor physio. And I know that's not the reality for so many. So my goal as a coach was now to support people in a space where I can help them understand as much as I'm able to within my scope of practice, if they're unable to access these resources, or provide them with, there's some really excellent social media accounts that provide free education online. And so being able to get the word out really and raise awareness and normalize these conversations, saying that the struggle is real and it's hard and we don't have to push through.
Right.
What are we rushing to, hit a PR after we've given birth?
Yeah. If
that means that we have to wear a liner to the gym every time, or, worry about trips to the grocery store, so and the other part of that is also knowing that the support system that you have access to can help you alleviate symptoms. It can help you manage your symptoms and feel more confident and capable in your body. And just that alone can help us get out of bed in the morning and do our day-to-day tasks, driving kids, carrying things, lifting, moving, all of that stuff just in our day-to-day lives. Forget about the athleticism part, right? Like this is our day-to-day, right? And if we feel confident in our day-to-day, that's going to translate to the gym and vice versa.
Yeah. Oh, it totally does. So I find this so incredible. There's a number of things. One is that that you have alluded to is that you have created a space, you've created a community that can actually have these conversations. And I think that is so important to just kind of settle into our way of thinking, because in a coaching relationship and the groups that we live in and train in, and why do we do sport? Well, for a lot of people, it's because we want to have that social connection. And, people, if you're avoiding sport, if you're avoiding that amazing run group that you used to be with, or if you're avoiding doing, the tennis game that you had, prior, or it had been so long, that the first thing is to find a place. And, you are one community. And I know within my own community, we talk about these things. We kind of, we bring it out in the open. It's like, it's totally normal. Like,
Yeah.
let's figure this out. There is a way that you can be supported. So that brings me into a specific question of, okay, so how do we shift from, physiotherapy into pelvic floor health as a practice? Because it's one thing when you're guided and you have that accountability and your appointment is in your calendar. And then we go into, all right, how do we think about this in a practice and in our strength training and incorporating it more?
Yeah, and that's a really great question. So I find a lot of people will stop after rehab,
Right.
and then they want to enter into exercise, but they're like, oh, that seems like it's too intense. Or maybe I'm just going to stick to these light weights.
Right.
Or I can't do crunches anymore. And I was one of those people. I didn't do crunches for, like years and years and years. And I didn't even have a severe tear. This was just what we've been told, right? So we become accustomed to it. And, bridging that gap is really where somebody like me can come in to say, you've done the rehab, now what? And let's regain that strength. So let's work with intention. So mindful programming is a part of what I do. And the idea is not to focus on your pelvic floor the entire time. You cannot deadlift your body weight when you're thinking about your vag. You need your legs, you need your glutes, you need your hamstrings, you need your back, you need your whole body, right? This is a full body experience.
All right.
That's why we do those things, right?
Right.
And so my physio, she told me, like, one of the best quotes she ever told me was, get your head out of your vag.
Oh my
Like, just get your head out of there. I was overthinking it. And we do that. We are too focused on the breath. We are too focused on the bracing. Are we doing it right? Are we doing it wrong? Is this going to make things worse? It's a process. So I start people really at the foundational level. Let's relearn those movement patterns. Let's work on the breath work so that when you are ready to get into the higher intensity stuff or the heavier stuff, you're not thinking about your breathing. You're not thinking about your pelvic floor anymore. You're just thinking about lifting the bar, or you're just thinking about going out for that run and getting that feeling that you love getting from that run.
That brings I love what you're saying. I love that idea of progression with a twist. We think of progression so much as, okay, we're going to have, first, body weight, then you add a bar, then you add maybe a couple, plates, and then you can get to lifting heavy. But you've just totally twisted it in another way in terms of also mindset. I absolutely adore that. So, and I guess that was bringing us to our next point of like progression. So you've just started foundation and then you build up from there. So how do we know when we're ready to, start doing that? Do we have to have a really good solid breath practice, or?
That's a gray area.
Right.
And so the question that I like to put out to clients is, are you experiencing symptoms? Are you experiencing pain, pressure, leaking? If those things are still happening, that's okay. Let's look at how we can, adjust this exercise. And again, it is about modification. So this is another area where I think a lot of the trainers are just now learning about, is instead of saying, okay, well, don't do that at all.
Right.
And so the client is saying, okay, well, if I'm in a boot camp class, am I supposed to just stand there while they're doing high knee runs? No, there is always an alternative, and so again, this really comes into listening to your body and understanding your symptoms.
Right.
For me, if I have a prolapse symptom coming in during a workout, to me, I know for my body, that is not the end of the world, because I'm not gonna ruin my body. I'm not making things worse. And I'm going to take the rest I need. I know the strategy. And it's also about so that brings me to teaching strategies, right? So what happens if I leak during my class or my session? Or if I feel pressure during my lifting session, right? So it's learning what to do and when, and how to manage that. And mindset is a huge part of that, right? So we don't want all or nothing. We don't want to give up. We don't want to stop completely. We can keep going. What alternatives are going to get me the same or similar results
Mhm.
without maybe the intensity or that higher weight.
Yeah. I had a quote, Steve Sisson, he's a University of Texas track coach, or he was, and he always said, it's always up to the coach to be creative enough to figure another way to do it. So it's not, if something isn't working for you, it is up to the coach. And yeah, like, how do we modify, and staying focused on what is the intent of the practice
Yeah,
rather than the way we're going to practice. And am I right in hearing you? And that's what you're saying?
absolutely. Absolutely. So, if deadlifts are giving you back pain and your form is actually looking okay, but perhaps you're just not able to, and your body's not able to generate enough tension
Yeah.
for that weight, then we reduce the weight. If that doesn't work, we look for another hinge movement. How
Yeah.
many hinge movements could we list off right now? We're
Right.
still going to get a similar result. We're still strengthening similar areas. We're
Mhm.
just modifying for today. And that's the other important thing. This is not forever.
Yeah.
Today, let's see how you feel next week. And again, it's also important to remember that pelvic floor symptoms, particularly prolapse, can be impacted not just by exercise,
Right.
but again, by stress, lack of sleep,
Hmm.
tension, dehydration, bowel movements, gut health. So many factors play into how our pelvic floor responds. And our cycle is a big one as well.
Right. It's so interesting that you say that, because one of my one of my things, my superpower, is talking about the integration of mindset, nutrition, training, and recovery. And within each of those, what you're also shining a light on is, here we have, and this something that we want to say, oh, it's my pelvic floor.
Mhm.
And it's never one thing. It's like, what else could it be? And when we are in, with the symptoms of perimenopause, I mean, you just listed symptoms of perimenopause,
Mhm.
like, right, like sleep, like, so when we think of a pelvic floor health, like, it can be, there's so much coming in here. And I loved what you said is, it might not work today, but let's remain curious the next time
Yes.
we show up, because your sleep, your, where you are in your cycle, or, because things for perimenopause, it's like you could have an estrogen swing and then it comes
Yes.
down, and who knows where it's going to be for you. But to always come back to, okay, well, I'm here, it's a new day, let's see if we can have a practice.
Absolutely. And this is why I find a coach who's really in tune with you can
Mhm.
help. This is what helped me in my strength training journey. I worked with a strength coach at the gym that I was training at, and she was fantastic. We literally took it down to one lift every session.
Mm.
How would your pelvic floor respond during and after?
Mm.
Does the hip thrust bother your pelvic floor? Does a deadlift bother you? Does a squat? And then everything else was accessory work. And she
Okay.
and she kept track of it. She kept the notes.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have to worry about that. I just had to be open and honest about what I was feeling.
Yeah.
And so I had the space to do that. I had somebody that I trusted, that
Yeah.
I could have these conversations with very candidly. And,
Mhm.
working together is what helped me get to where I am today.
That's amazing. It's really cool. I'm so appreciate this conversation, in that it gives us a lot of hope to think about how we can be in our body in just a slightly different way.
Mhm.
And that we can always say, well, this was what was happening, and maybe there's something that I can create in the future. And I just absolutely adore that. What about, can you just talk a tiny bit more to just like the time and the patience? You've talked and alluded to it continuously through this, and the process that you just had, like with your coach, of saying, okay, we're going to do one exercise and then everything else is accessory. Can you just affirm that that space of like where we can go, what we have to know with an expectation, and it's not nothing snap?
Yes.
Yeah.
Time and patience, the two things that nobody really wants to wait for, right? And give.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a journey, and progress is not linear,
Mm.
right? So I can write the perfect program for somebody, and within a week I would have to throw it out maybe because their body just didn't respond.
Right.
And I, as a coach, have to know that that's not my fault. The client has to know that that's not their fault. We just have to work together. And maybe, again, like you said, I love the word they use, curious. Be a little bit more curious. Ask a lot of questions. See what's going on. It's a lot of trial and error. And for some people, they may find that their journey is very linear and they did all the things that they were supposed to do and they were back at it, no problem. I know lots of people like that. I also know people like myself who took 2.5 years. And a big part of that was not just the capability of my body. For me, it was mindset too. I was scared. I was scared to put a barbell on my back. It took 1 year before I was able to do a barbell squat.
Wow.
Not because I physically couldn't, I probably could have. I was just not mentally ready yet. And so my coach didn't push that on me either.
Yeah.
So it is a lot of both mindset and body. And we have to be able to go in with almost no expectations.
Right.
And consider what our goals are. It's
Yeah.
so hard. And, especially for athletes who are very goal oriented, results oriented, we have to take the wins where we can get them.
Yeah. Oh man. Take the wins where we can get them. Stay present in whatever that possibility is that day, and then keep going from there. Love it. So you have a gift to us. It's called Return to Running.
Yes.
Yes. Can you just tell us just really briefly what that is about?
It's my free guide.
Yeah.
And it's for anyone who either has been on a hiatus from running or is newly postpartum and wants to return to running. And I just lost my words here. And the guide is to, give you an overview of things to look for, how to know when you're ready to progress, tips and tricks, as well as 3 free strength workouts.
So cool. Well, thank you for that. I think it's going to be really exciting for some people that have been avoiding it for a really long time. Like I'm talking about decades after they may have had birth, like had a birth experience, which changed their whole pelvic floor, and they haven't found this sort of a conversation before. So thank you. All right. I have 3 really rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I think so.
Give us one moment of courage.
When I jumped out of an airplane at 14,000 feet.
That's so fun. That's so fun. And there was actually, I think, yes, the speaker that also said something very similar to that. I'm like, what is this all about female athletes, jumping out of planes these days?
Well, I did that when I was 19, I think.
But that would have been so big. Okay, I will not be doing that. Give us one moment or one thing that you're curious about right now.
How the rest of 2021 is going to pan out for us.
Oh, well, that's something to be curious about. I love it actually that you said that. If we can stay in a place of curiosity, it's a lot better than in any other spot. Like,
I don't want to be in fear.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, okay, well, this is going to be interesting. Let's go for a ride. Tell us one thing you're grateful for.
Oh, my family.
Nice.
My family. I know it's cliche. This is so cliche, but they are. I love my family and I love my kids. I adore them.
Oh, I think it's so, maybe, I don't know if I would have asked these questions prior to the pandemic, what people's answers were, but it is so just, the family, and family can mean your nuclear family can mean your community. It can mean so many different things, but this idea of connection, it's just continuously coming up. Yes. And so just on that, I just want to say, get connected, people. Let's, keep talking and being in a community, no matter where you are, what you're doing, because it is our life. And it is something that we're, people keep on saying that they're grateful for. And there's a reason for that. Do you have anything that you want to leave us with? Yeah, I'll give you the last word.
I would like to leave everybody with the idea that you know yourself and you know your body better than anybody. Trust that. And stay curious, just like you say. I'm going to quote you, stay curious.
I love
Ask
it.
questions.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
Thank you. Bye-bye.